Hey everybody, Miss Wallace here. I'm going to read you a story called If You're Not from the Prairie. And you see the author is David Bouchard and the illustrator is Henry Ripplinger. And you see an image here on our cover. So today we're going to read this book that's by a writer who has some strong feelings about the place where he grew up. The book is called If You're Not from the Prairie. The author, David Bouchard, thinks the Prairie is a pretty unique place, so let's hear why. If you are not from the Prairie, if you're not from the Prairie, you don't know the sun. You can't know the sun. Diamonds that bounce off crisp winter snow, warm waters and dugouts and lakes that we know. The sun is our friend from when we are young. A child of the prairie is part of the sun. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the sun. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the wind. You can't know the wind. Our cold winds of winter cut right to the core. Hot summer wind devils can blow down the door. As children, we know when we play any game, the wind will be there, yet we play just the same. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the wind. You can see the leaves falling from the trees blowing in the wind. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the sky. You can't know the sky. The bold prairie sky is clear, bright, and blue, though sometimes cloud messages give us a clue. Monstrous gray mushrooms can hint of a storm, or painted pink feathers say goodbye to the warm. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the sky. Here in East Texas, we have some pretty vivid images of cloud messages. The clouds telling us about maybe incoming weather, or maybe it's a beautiful sunrise or beautiful sunset. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know what's flat. You've never seen flat. When travelers pass through across our great plain, they all view our home, they all say the same. It's simple and flat. They've not learned to see the particular beauty that's now part of me. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know what's flat. If you're not from the prairie, you've not heard the grass. You've never heard grass. In strong summer winds, the grains in grass bend and sway to a dance that seems never to end. It whispers its secrets, they tell of this land, and the rhythm of life played by nature's own hand. If you're not from the prairie, you've never heard grass. Have you ever heard grass before? Or heard the wind blow through the grass? So you're not from the prairie, and yet you know snow? You think you know snow? Blizzards bring danger, as legends have told. In deep drifts, we roughhouse, ignoring the cold. At times, we look out at great seas of white. So bright is the sun that we squeeze our eyes tight. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know snow. And snow is one thing that we don't get a lot of around here in East Texas. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know our trees. You can't know our trees. The trees that we know have taken so long to live through our seasons to grow tall and strong. They're loved and they're treasured. We watched as they grew. We knew they were special. The prairie has few. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know our trees. Still, you're not from the prairie, and yet you know cold. You say you've been cold? Of all those memories we share when we're old, none are more clear than that hard, bitter cold. You'll not find among us a soul who can say, I've conquered the wind on a cold winter's day. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know the cold. You've never been cold. I would venture to say I've probably never been that cold. That looks like a really cold day. If you're not from the prairie, you don't know me. You just can't know me. Think about who is saying that here. You see, my hair's mostly wind, my eyes filled with grit, my skin's red or brown, my lips chapped and split. Who do you think that might be? I've lain on the prairie and heard grasses sigh. I've stared at the vast open bowl of the sky. I've seen all those castles and faces and clouds. My home is the prairie, and I cry out loud. If you're not from the prairie, you can't know my soul. You don't know our blizzards, you've not fought our cold. You can't know my mind, nor ever my heart, unless deep within you there's somehow a part of these things that I've said that I know, the wind, sky, and earth, the storms, and the snow. Best say you have, and then we'll be one, for we will have shared that same blazing sun. So I want you to think about prairies. You've probably studied those in social studies and talking about the regions of the United States. We know prairies are flat and they're very windy places because they don't have a lot of trees. They do have extremes of weather, and they mentioned the blizzards. We don't usually have blizzards here, but I want you to think about what a blizzard may be. They give the wind there in the prairie a lot of personal attributes, so personification there. The prairie does have lakes and dugouts, and the narrator here is from the prairie. There's lots of grasslands, farms, and open fields. Life on the prairie can be hard, but there's lots to do outdoors. The author, we can tell, loves the place where he grew up and feels that it made him who he is. People who live on the prairie can learn to love its hardships and its beauties. And think about the text. David Bouchard uses rhyming words and repeated phrases. So he uses repetition to describe prairie life and explain how it's a part of him. As the writer, he speaks directly to the reader through the poetry. And a poem's format can change at any point in the poem, and that change is usually significant and has meaning from the author. And we see our illustrations in this book give us a clear sense of how the prairie looks and how it feels. I hope you enjoyed it.